All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mélanie Rondreux, for those who don't know me as yet. I am one of the coordinators of the Création Africa program, and it is my absolute pleasure this morning to be welcoming all of you to Création Africa's fifth masterclass of the season, led today by Juliet Kavishe on ways of seeing design. So thank you to all of you for joining. So Juliette, firstly, as our guest speaker for today. Thank you also to the 12 finalist entrepreneurs of the Création Africa program for being in the class with us this morning, as well as representatives from the 40 cohort of the 40 entrepreneurs cohort that we previously supported as part of the program. Thank you to the Uru Africa team also for coordinating this masterclass series and being our incubator partner on the program. Thank you also to everyone joining us online today through the live stream via the ICoD platform. We are very glad that you're joining us on this great masterclass this morning. So for those of you that are joining us online and that may not be fully familiar with the program as yet, I wanted to say a few words about Création Africa to start. So Création Africa is an initiative that has been launched by the French Ministry for Europe and Foreign Affairs in 2023 to boost cultural and creative industries in Africa. The Création Africa program locally is coordinated by the Embassy of France and the French Institute of South Africa to support entrepreneurship, more specifically, in the cultural and creative industries of South Africa, Lesotho, and Malawi through mentorship, incubation, seed funding, as well as immersion into international investment networks. We are implementing this program with the support of Uru Africa as the partner incubator, as well as the French Public Development Investment Bank, BPI France. So this Création Africa Masterclass series has been designed as an opportunity to learn from and engage with key experts and professionals from the creative and cultural industries to build bridges and share knowledge and insights across our countries and across CCI sectors as well. So in this context, it is my privilege to be introducing to you our guest speaker for today, Juliet Kavishe, who will unpack, as I was mentioning, ways of seeing design with us today. So Juliet, you are a practicing professional interior architect, design educator, and a design competition juror with a career spanning 17 years and 2 continents. You've worked as an interior architect and architectural designer on various projects globally, from conceptual to completion stages. You are currently an executive board member of the Pan Afrikan Design Institute and also a vice president of the International Council of Design. So today you will give us guidance and insight into design and open us to new ways of seeing design. We really can't wait to hear more. So thank you so much once again for your participation in this masterclass series, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you to everyone who's here. I see some of my mentees, I see some of my fabulous designers here, some of you whose work I actually adore, so it's really exciting to be here. I'd like to begin with something that I always do when starting a presentation. My name is Juliet. I am currently located on the traditional lands of the original Tswana people. I would like us to honor the land that we sit on and respect the Tswana people who are the custodians of this land currently known as Gauteng. I'm going to share my screen so we can start on the presentation. Just want to wait for it to get to full screen. Perfect. So when I was asked to do a masterclass, I thought about my journey to getting here as a designer, right? And I can't talk about design without talking about who I am and the layers and histories and experiences that form the patchwork of my life and my experience as a designer. This one quote from Ben Okri from the book The Famished Road was sent to me by one of my best friends. She said, this quote really explained the expanse of your existence. In the beginning, there was a river, and the river became a road, and the road branched out to the whole world. And because the road was once a river, it was always hungry. And this is basically who I am. I move through spaces, life, viewing design, consuming design wherever I go. I'm constantly yearning, constantly seeking, constantly looking for a place to call home, looking for a sense of identity. Both my parents and my grandparents are from Tanzania. My paternal side of the family is from Kilimanjaro, Tanzania, which is the highest peak in East Africa, actually on the continent, to be quite frank. In front of you is an image of Kilimanjaro in its gloriousness. The biggest peak is Kibu. The second peak is Mwenzi. A lot of people summit Mwenzi. Very few people summit Kibu. And at my grandfather's house, when you step outside of the house and you look up, you almost can touch the mountain. You can feel its grandeur, its presence. In a way, I always felt connected to Tanzania. But in all honesty, this is the patchwork of my actual identity and presence and how I got to be a designer. Yes, I'm Tanzanian. Yes, I was born there, but I left when I was very young. And throughout my lifetime, I have lived, not visited, lived in at least 10 different cities, different senses of urbanity, different prospects, different hemispheres. And when you kind of collate these experiences together, you'll almost understand why I am so obsessed with the way we look at things and the way we interpret things, because I am the myriad of the things and places. I started today's masterclass honoring the context in which I'm currently sitting in, which is Gauteng in South Africa. But I'm also honoring the other contexts that have led to where I am today as a designer. I started my education in the United Kingdom, so my formative years were there. I did my high school in Kenya. I did my university in Pretoria, South Africa. I first started working in Cape Town before working in the rest of the world. Another key moment of praxis where my theories of design and my love for art and my love for interior design and interior architecture culminated in New York City. I also worked in Windhoek, Namibia, and now I am sitting in Johannesburg. All of these contribute to the way I view design. So I'll start with pause. A lot of time as designers, we sort of just get a project and we jump straight into it. And we never sort of sit with the problems, sit with the opportunity, sit with the idea, kind of get excited about the first nuances and prospects of a new project. And so I did what every designer would do. I posed this question to my really close friends and I said, look, I will be giving a masterclass. What would you be interested in hearing from me? A lot of times we forget that our friends have known us the longest and they kind of see a pattern and a through thread through your life that you sometimes are too subjective to really notice. So these were some of the things that came up. A lot about design, the traditional and contemporary practices of design, being an African designer in the context of Africa, what tools and methodologies I use as a designer. But the big word there is actually design. And there were conversations leading up to this masterclass with myself and my friends, with myself and fellow designers, with myself and students, about how we see design. It's one thing to stand up and say, I am a designer. It's one thing to say that I have an interest in it. But do we know what it is? Do we know the length and breadth and the idiosyncrasies that make up this word design? Throughout history, the word design was phrased differently. The first designer in the building environment was probably the mason, the builder, the guy that made the bricks to build the cathedrals. That was formalized into architect. That then became further disseminated into designer, one who creates, one who designates meaning to things. I took a fascination for John Berger's ways of seeing. It's one of those seminal works that are recommended as almost recommended as good reading for students who are studying art and art history. But even myself as a designer, I took an interest in this. This book became a TV series. You can find it on YouTube and listen to it. It's a 4-part series. And he basically breaks down how we view things. Yes, it is in the context of art, but I think there are lifelong lessons there. One thing that I took away from the first episode is that the way we see things is not spontaneous and natural. It is formed out of habit and convention. So how do we formulate these habits? What are these conventions that we as designers potentially have? And are they steeped in bias? When people ask me, why are you a designer? Why do you keep on harping on about this? One of my fellow vice presidents of the International Council of Design, Jonas, he posted this on LinkedIn about a month ago, and it made me pause. There are 8 billion of users worldwide, users of design. So your role in the makings and the machining and the policy, trends, zeitgeist in the world affects 8 billion people. You matter, we matter as designers. And the way we view and illustrate and show our work and communicate our work and our ideas is important, because there are 8 billion people who are using our products, spaces, ideas, methodologies daily. After pausing, I observe. So I took a step back and kind of unpacked my biases, and I will present a couple of images in 3 design disciplines: architecture, product design, and interior design. I studied at an institution where, when I graduated from that institution and visited the Bauhaus Museum in Berlin, I realized, to my shock, that what I viewed as good design was leaning very, very, very Western. The canon of Western knowledge and what is good design, what is appropriate design, was steeped in the big M modernism. Le Corbusier's Ville Savoir was heralded as a machine for living, the most successful, functional building ever designed. But something in me, something rooted, something deep within me, could appreciate the geometry due to habits, conventions that I was taught. But the latent African in me, the 5-year-old that was bewildered by the frescoes in Florence, that stared up at the massive statue of David and looked at the sinews and the muscles and understood the complexity of the human body and that particular statue inhabiting that space and me participating in that observation, I felt like something was missing. And not aesthetics, but maybe the broader understanding of what is successful design. The term vernacular then came into my vocabulary. And it was very interesting, my bias towards vernacular. It never leaned towards these beautiful castles and libraries in Timbuktu in Mali, or the mosques of that time. Vernacular almost became synonymous with rural. Again, a bias. This is vernacular architecture. This is beautiful architecture. In 2020, during the lockdown, there was this resurgence of the idea of neo-tenny, something soft, almost childlike, something that embraces us and comforts us. Yes, during 2020, there were global pandemics, destabilization of various economies, wars, and we were craving something soft and bulbulous. This building, or these collections of buildings, is a community center. It's a village in Iran and was designed by Zab Architects. It was completed in 2020. But again, it changed my idea of the potential for the building environment. What happens when we engage with community? How do we start seeing architecture through the eyes of culture, through the eyes of political unrest? Again, when we say African architecture, why is this not deemed African architecture when it is situated in an African context? It is African architecture. So again, reframing our understanding. The chair is the most complex product you could ever design. It's also the most fascinating design piece because it deals directly with the human body and how we use, move, congregate, gather, worship. Our rituals are enhanced by where we sit, how we rest. What is vernacular? What is indigeneity? And is there a similarity between cross cultures? I love this kubistol. It's carved out of the trunk of a wood. It's Norwegian. Beautiful. But there are markings on it. Indigenous writing, indigenous ways of carving. Why is the term indigeneity assigned to third world viewpoints? Why is it not a global term? How does indigeneity differ from neoteny? Is it materiality? We still get the soft rounded forms. It is comfortable in the body. It's maybe more ergonomic. It's a bit cheeky. It's a bit juvenile. But the forms are informed by our vernacular understanding of what the body needs. How do we combine the two? Again, African designer, Atang Shikare, he's an amazing product designer based in the Western Cape. Did this beautiful chair marrying traditional crafts, traditional ways of making, design, and combining it with your almost colonial view of the armchair. This is an interior view of the courtyard of Villa Savoie, modernism with a big M, clean lines, white, daylight, introduction of vegetation, sparsity in furniture. We use what is functional. There's no need to decorate, less is more. Vernacular architecture in Bali, leaning into materiality and combining that with modern sanitary ware. Neotenic interiors. It's a beautiful Mumbai home. It was completed in 2021. And these clients really enjoyed this idea of something young and spitey, and yet modern and comfortable. It's a bit Scandinavian as well. And then we have African interiors, designed by ARC, which is a South African interior architectural firm. Most of the products are African made and African designed. So after unpacking that and observing my own bias and acknowledging it, observing the bias in the narrative of what we know to be design and how we communicate it and how we move as designers in the world, I started analyzing why this is, what became of it, but then also what influenced my normative position as a designer. Where do I stand in the nexus of architecture, interior, art, experience, Africa? Who am I as an African designer? And how do I want to be perceived, or do I even care? Is it that I am a designer on the continent of Africa enough to qualify that I'm an African designer? Surely yes. So I analyzed my experiences. When did I start drawing? How old was I? 2. When did I start hearing different kinds of music in different cities? Why was I obsessed with Florence as a city? It was my first experience of a mosquito the size of my hand. Heat like I'd never experienced it before. My younger brother crying, my mom pushing him in a chair, and us running away from our parents, trying to play hide and seek. The first time I visited Kariakor in Dar es Salaam, the first time I visited the Maasai market in Kenya, the noises, the smells, the colors, the language. The church on a hill in Windhoek. The coffee presser building in Windhoek. Dutch architecture. Brutalist architecture at the University of Pretoria. My first year at the University of Pretoria, making with my hands. My experience at the Guggenheim Museum in New York. Working on Frank Gehry's Abu Dhabi Guggenheim Museum. Windhoek, Namibia, Swakopmund, the Oshibambo, the Herero. the fabrics. The first time sitting on a panel talking about African design. How do these things culminate in my practice? My experiences informed my values. My practice illustrates my ideas. The firms I chose to practice in, the knowledge I gained from those mentors, and gradually seeing my confidence as a designer, my exploration with materiality, my obsession with context and user, and knowing that as an interior architect and an interior designer, I am fulfilling a purpose. How do we teach? How do we talk about design if we're not practicing it? If we're not experiencing the day-to-day challenges of design in order to do better, in order to hone our skills better? In my practice, I picked up a lot of influence from the modernists, a lot from Carlos Scarpa, the way he plays with form, a lot from my context. So a project in Côte d'Ivoire is very different to a project in Providence in the US. The context is different. The needs of the context are different. In analyzing my own design practice, I'm able to explain the decisions that I make, but I'm able to engage in sight and engage with fellow designers with the confidence of an African designer. Everything that I am up until today, my knowledge, my viewpoint, my experiences, let me look at design and say, this is good. Present my design and say, this is good. Because all the biases that inform the way I see good design have been unpacked, reshuffled, and resettled in my brain. So a couple of questions for you to ask yourself. This is a masterclass after all. What is our role as a designer? And it could answer it as your role as a design collective, or what is your role as an individual? Have you thought about that? Like really understood where you sit within society? What do you stand for? Designers do not live in a vacuum. We are used every day. Our products and spaces are used every day. What societal norms do we challenge? What is happening in the world? What are we comfortable with? What are we not comfortable with? How does that inform the design decisions that we make? And then how do we use design to pose questions and drive change? At the beginning of 2020, I had just come back from Bali and I felt unsettled. I had been practicing design for almost 15 years. And I just felt like I wasn't really contributing to the greater zeitgeist of design. I don't know where that feeling came from. It could be because my grandmother was an activist. My parents were activists and educators. But there was this vacuum within me. Yes, I was designing these pretty things and these beautiful things, and I enjoyed it. It came quite naturally and easy to me, but there was something missing. I was invited to a coffee with one of my now mentors, and we spoke about my practice. I had never taught design before. I was then invited to sit on a panel discussing design education on the African continent. There were panelists from all over the world, mostly, and when I say all over the world, the African diaspora, including the continent of Africa and India. And we spoke about design in a way that I had never engaged before. It was open, it was humbling, it was respectful, it was void of ego. The greater good was the end goal. How do we make sure that the future designers on the continent of Africa are proud to be called African designers? And something in me was sparked. The challenging of societal norms, the posing of questions, and the driving of change. Now, not to say that I can do that, and that's kind of the banner I want to carry for the rest of my life, to be, the champion for that. But in 2020, I almost got this bright moment and a confirmation of purpose. What you've practiced can actually be used to teach. There is a point of view that you have as an African designer, female African designer on the continent, who's practiced globally. So you can actually pose questions and you can drive change. At the beginning of the year, the youth of Kenya took to the streets. They were opposing policy that was about to be passed in government and parliament that was going to disenfranchise the population of Kenya. I always look to the youth almost as a barometer for my value system, because the youth tend to see things not just idealistically, but for what they really are. I feel like as you get older, you get jaded, you get tired, the complexities of life amplify. Watching this unfold, having lived in Kenya for several years, having studied high school in Kenya, I studied art there, studied music. I speak Swahili, that's where I learned Swahili. Knowing these very streets that the students and the young ones were walking on. Watching the call to action on TikTok, Instagram, the use of social media. The call to action was just not for the politicians, but also for their peers, and specifically for designers. They needed designers to help with messaging. They needed designers to help with policy. Another spark was driven in me, awakened in me some almost like a positive view of the world, that all is not lost. Kenya is one of the few countries that has a design department in the Department for Public Works. And its mandate is to support, develop, and promote design practice and the profession in Kenya in the areas of interior design, graphic design, and product design development. Imagine that, designers driving policy and change. It's because we have a unique point of view. It's because we see the world differently. You are not a designer by mistake. Your observations, your critical thoughts, yes, they may appear to come naturally, but again, habit and convention. You are taught to view things differently. You are taught to debate. You are taught to question, to look at things critically, to analyze. We are taught to pause and reflect. I wish every government on the planet had a department of design that really analyzed policy for humans. We deal with humans daily. We interact with them. We cushion them. We embrace them with our designs. We have an in-depth knowledge of the human condition, of the zeitgeist of the time, of the future trends. We have foresight that our governments need. So you've paused, observed, analyzed, and now we reflect. Another question I'd like to pose to you. Again, you can answer this in your own time. How do we expand and extend our ways of seeing design? How do we go about this? What do we need to challenge? What do we need to promote? The rhetoric nowadays is that indigeneity is king. But I also like the idea that my training did not go to waste. Yes, it was framed from the gaze of the West, but it gave me a framework. It gave me a methodology to use, the practice of design thinking, in order to analyze and appreciate design today. My move to Johannesburg was not by mistake. I was sitting in my apartment in Windhoek, feeling sorry for myself, feeling despondent, needing a challenge. I wanted to be at the epicenter of Africa. I wrote down 3 cities: Lagos, Nairobi, and Johannesburg. I had lived in Nairobi before. Johannesburg, in all honesty, seemed like an easier move from Windhoek than Lagos. And so I Googled jobs, architectural jobs in South Africa, and the first firm that came up, I applied, and in 6 months, I had driven my car across 2 borders. All my things were headed to Johannesburg, my worldly possessions at the time. And I stepped into a city that was as dynamic as it is popular, the city of gold, ICoD. There is a power in the city. There is an energy in the city. But also there are pockets of culture. Depending on where you situate yourself, you will find your people in Johannesburg. You will find the activists, you will find the power players of industry, finance, titans of industry, politicians, bankers, artists, musicians, jazz, amapiano, house music, contemporary and traditional artists. It is an amalgamation of Africa. You will find every culture in the city. And this city made me feel at home. I started teaching about 3 years ago. And I think it was 4 years ago, in my second year of teaching, I was invited to participate in a program called 10%. The institution that I teach at has this program called 10%, where you donate or you give 10% of the academic year to sustainable development programs. The United Nations has listed these, and I was involved in a project that dealt with decolonizing our education system and its sustainability development goal number 4. And I was working in a pluridisciplinary, multi-generational practice in the studio. We had students from the ages of 18 to 21 of interior design, multimedia design, and graphic design, lecturers within those professions as well, different tribes, races, religions, you name it. And we were looking at African writing systems. I had had the fortunate opportunity of meeting one of the titans of design, Saki Mafundikwa, in person. But I also watched his TED talk about African writing systems. And the one thing he stated was, our writing systems are a visual language based on the African creative heritage, right? We are inherently creative. We have been creating for years. The way we communicate through the written script is a form of creativity. It's a form of communication. Our design practice, the way we view things, are always laden with social norms within our indigenous knowledge systems. The idea of family, the idea of community, how we house family and community. The ways we build, our construction methods, our materials, very sustainable because we use local. We use that which is available and we make it beautiful. And contextually, that building system and way of building works for our environment. Our inherent knowledge systems transferred through oral tradition, stories, folklore, how we move within our culture, our spiritual and ritual norms, the way we pray, where we face, who we pray to, our medicine, our chemistry. So in the studio, we unpacked over the past 3 years several South African languages, and we reimagined what those writing systems could be. I was fascinated with this project, purely because, again, my context is multicultural, multispatial. I have always been the foreigner. I am always having to learn a new language. I'm always observing, not to fit in, but to honor my new current state. So a project like this opened my eyes to that which we potentially overlooked or ignored, or maybe just didn't reimagine. So ourselves and the students reimagined what the isiZulu writing system could potentially be. And the students looked at the spatial interaction of the isiZulu language in terms of the homestead, the boma. What are these artifacts, architectural artifacts? What is the symbolism, the Zulu love letters, the beads, the colors? What are the rituals and practices? The Zulu honor life and death, and the idea of the ancestor being the holder of knowledge and wisdom. And a grid was formed. informed by the kraal, the homestead, the center of our community, which is felt globally. We feel it as Africans. Our community is our family. But also the architectural mapping of the isiZulu homestead. And then alongside that, the idea of life and death, and one not living outside the other, communication between both, and hence a grid was. This is the sentence that the students developed in the Zulu language. Again, honoring life and death. Different glyphs, symbols represent different words, different ideologies in the Zulu culture. A representation of community, togetherness, culture, language, life and death, respect and honor, always twofold. The more I reflect beyond indigeneity, I realize my advocacy has been not dormant, but if I look back at all the things that have led to where I am today, I've always been interested in how we view design, how people view design, and how we advocate for it. I believe as designers, we need to be advocates for our practice. This year, we celebrated International Design Day. It's celebrated every year on the 27th of April. It's one of the initiatives driven by the International Council of Design. We will be celebrating Africa Design Day towards the end of September, and that is driven by the Pan Afrikan Design Institute. It will be held in Botswana. There is a need to celebrate design, but there's also a need to commune and gather and talk about how we see it and how we view it. I have been an advocate for design for a while, and it's leaned now into policy and change. How do we apply the way we see? Some key takeaways for you as designers. Always have contextual awareness. I know it seems like an obvious thing, but sometimes we get carried away. Where you are is enough. Analyze that. That will inspire you beyond your imagination, which will then challenge your normative position, where you stand as a designer. And it's okay to listen to differing points of view, but only until you know the other side are you able to establish or reinforce your own, or maybe create a third normative position that is a combination of both ideas, whether they clash or not. Don't forget to be a critical design thinker. Question as much as you can. Always ask why, what, where, how, why. And then communicate your beautiful designs in a way that we as designers can enjoy, as the public can too. This would be recommended reading for anyone who's a designer on the continent, or actually globally. I don't know where everyone is from or listening in. If you can get your hands on these 4 books, The Black Experience in Design, it's a collective of different design disciplines in the United States. 6 editors gathered several designers together to write an amazing book on the experience of being a Black designer in the United States, the kind of contention of identity, expression, and how we reflect as designers. Dori Tunstall's book on decolonizing design has become literally a workbook and a guidebook for me as a designer in how I engage with design and respect the cultures I'm stepping into, but also to be aware of my bias and also honor the context in which I learned said bias. Afrosport, again, is a collection of stories, narratives by designers and sportsmen on the African continent, from surfing in Dakar to rugby in South Africa to the Matatu culture in Kenya. So it's a really great book if you can get a hold of it. And a recently published book by a fellow Pan Afrikan Design Institute member called Decolonizing Design in Africa, Towards New Theories, Methods, and Practices. I think it's available on Amazon. I can't wait to read this. I've ordered it already. I wouldn't talk about design without giving you some tools. So read the books. Ask yourself these questions constantly. I started with my history. I started with my experiences, the places that have affected me positively and negatively. But one thing that has been constant is design. It is how I view my history. But it's also how I view myself in the future. And I also view you as designers and what we can do for the future of design. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliet. I would like to open the floor for some questions. I'm sure that this has triggered maybe comments, questions. We have quite a few designers with us in the class. Design applies also across many different disciplines of the CCI. So are there any comments, questions from the cohort?
Hi, Juliet.
Hello, Raymond.
Hi, that was
Thank you for your
beautiful. That
question.
was beautiful. And hello, everybody. So I was very much intrigued by the symbols that the designers came up with for the Zulu language. And I was, so I don't know if you can expand on that and like, how did you use the symbols? And if so, how far did you develop the language and where can one see that? Because I don't know, that was just so beautiful to look at and it was so intriguing. And the fact that everything was twofold, and, in life, I feel like there's always this duality in life. And I think that was just so spiritual, also like an element of spirituality in it. It was just so intriguing. I would like to learn more. If you can expand on that, please.
Hello, Raymond.
Colorful, very rich. Thank you.
Thank you, Raymond. I know it's one of those projects that almost catapulted my practice. I think communication, the way we communicate design, is really important. And I think the language of isiZulu, look, we did all the languages in South Africa, right? So there's a lot of research done, there are a lot of symbols that were developed. And yes, I don't know if there are recordings of it. I do have a recording of the lecture that I gave at Decorex that I will publish soon. But it's, again, illustrating how we can use our cultures and our traditions to create symbols that emphasize our language, right? So if I'm thinking of the word Ubuntu, in Swahili, we call that umoja, one. Already my hand doing that, on the continent, we understand what that collective is, right? So how do I represent that collection? How do I represent that, right? It's a universal understanding of a grouping, but we forget that hieroglyphics, the better writing systems, all these traditional writing systems on the continent are derived from gestures of our hands, inflections in our mouth. And using that kind of research to develop these writing systems was some of the processes and methodologies that we used. The students were very excited. I think also because we encouraged them to interview their grandparents, their parents, their friends, to do this research, which again engaged community, engaged family in the design process. So yes, more will be published on it. I will share as it gets published. And one of the most exciting projects I've ever worked on. Yeah. I hope that helps, Raymond.
No, it did. It was beautiful. And the fact that they interviewed the older generation, that just adds to the richness of it. And you mentioning the hieroglyphics as well. That is beautiful. I will follow you because I wanna learn more about that.
You're welcome.
Thank
Good
you so
morning.
much.
Thank you so much, Juliet. Sorry, Melanie. Sorry,
No
Melanie.
worries, go
Thank
for
you,
it, Terence.
Juliet.
And actually, just
Beautiful,
before you
beautiful.
ask your question,
Sure.
don't hesitate also to introduce yourselves to Juliet, just so that she can also position you. Yeah, we know each other quite well from the program, but for Juliet, that will be very useful. Floor
Okay,
is yours,
thank you.
Terence.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hi, Juliet.
Hi.
My name is Terry, founder of a fashion brand, a contemporary luxury clothing house based in Malawi. I am one of the top 12. Very exciting stuff. This has been one of the most intriguing experiences, and your talking about your experiences has also just triggered quite a lot of question. I think you already touched when you were talking about, the places that you've lived and how they influenced your design process and how you got to where you are. I wanted to ask, how did you adapt to the change of all those places? Because they all come with different expectations. They all come with different people and traditions and stuff like that. And again, you also started off with acknowledging where you are. Where did you, get that understanding of saying, I am here, I am centered here. How do I then now navigate my business and my craft? Um, that was my question.
Thank you, Terence. Great to meet you. Great question. And thank you for asking that. So for some reason, I always knew, I think it was the kind of nucleus family I grew up in. Because we were moving a lot, the sentiment was from my parents, again, Tanzanians, who grew up in Tanzania in the 70s, a very socialist country. Julius Nyerere was the president at the time, honoring of local, the political landscape of Tanzania in the 60s, 70s, and 80s was surrounded around honoring your local and being prideful of where you're from and what you're about. And I think my parents carried that with them and instilled it into us. So wherever we went, the idea was to put your head down, observe. You are unique. Yes, you come from this nucleus family, but you're stepping into a new world. When you start doing that from a young age, it almost becomes second nature. I think also studying design and consuming a lot of knowledge around indigeneity and decolonization, it made me aware, or it made me understand the importance of acknowledging my present, right? We tend to always be anxious about where we're going, where we're from, but rarely do we sit with our locality and say, whoa, let me just calm down. This is where I am right now. So I like to start all of my presentations honoring where I am right now to kind of just center myself, but also center the listener into my context and where I'm speaking from. That's honoring my context, right? And I think as designers, that idea of honoring your context being your first point of view, it was just ingrained in me, and it's helped me as a designer. I hope that helps, Terence.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Are there any other questions or comments, or maybe some of the designers from the cohort who wants to share about their processes or their ways of coming up with their designs? You know, it's a great opportunity that we have this morning to engage with Juliet, so feel free to make the best of this time.
Hi, can we ask a question?
Yes, sure.
Hi, Juliet. We are sisters and an inter-design studio. We actually heard you speak about the language at the Decorex summit, and it was fascinating and mind-blowing. And afterwards, I actually tried to look on Google, try to find more information, but I couldn't. So I'm glad to hear that it's going to be published soon, and we're looking forward to that. Just to tell you a bit about us and ask a question. So we design functional art, homeware, decor, and furniture pieces. We reimagine traditional African craft, but in a modern way, using things like beadwork, wirework, crochet work, and materials like audio cassette tapes. So really reimagining and pushing what the visual language is and trying to come up with something new. And one of the things we found is that Europeans or internationals really appreciate African design, but we find it challenging to get African people in the African continent they may appreciate it, but it's not something that they are owning yet or want to make part of their space. There's still so much of a European aesthetic or aspiration. So if you have any thoughts on that. Thanks.
I think you actually said it, European aspiration. The way we teach design puts that at the forefront of that which is deemed good, right? So even that which is, you open social media, you open any architectural website or blog, rarely do you find our, for lack of a word, African design called African design. It's either vernacular, indigenous, quirky, neotenic, it's othered. And in that communication, I think the aspiration to be seen as globally wealthy, globally acceptable, positioned within that space of that aspirational space is this dull beigeness, which I find very bizarre. We are not a dull beige people, and we teach dull beige things, right? So I love your products. I've seen them. I'm obsessed. Love your designs, and I love what you are doing in the design space. The integration of those specific forms that you use in your materiality and craftsmanship. But again, the word craft versus artist, right? Again, we have to decolonize the language. The idea of artifact versus product. I think I've spoken with Gianni about this. How do we change the point of view? And it's through designers like yourself. Just push. We see it. We love it. We appreciate your work. And there are a lot of people in this room that do as well. It's slow, it's arduous, but taking pride in African design as Africans has come such a long way in the past 4 years because of social media. But I think also interior designers using your products in spaces. So maybe there's a network with interior designers that needs to happen with architects, a staging that needs to happen in those spaces, not to convince, but to say, we're here. We are African designers. We don't need to convince anyone of our excellence. We're good at what we do, and it's actually beautiful. So we'll get there. I think platforms like Decorex help. Platforms like any kind of design day help as well on the continent. So kudos to you. It's slow, but let's be done with the beige.
Thank you. We all for the color, and yeah, this is also an issue for us, trying to move away from beige and trying to celebrate the vibrancy of Africa and African culture, and we'll get there. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Risita and Viveka, for your thoughts and questions. Diani, I see that you raised your hand.
Hi, thanks so much. My camera's off because we've got a power failure, so just saving bandwidth. We're really privileged to have you as a mentor, Juliet. Thanks so much, and I'm really loving this engagement. And really my question is, and I think for all of us here, how can we foster more collaboration and collective engagement like this? You just talked about network, and I think it's so helpful in working together to build this canon and sharing and platforming of African design. How do you think we can continue to build on this as African designers?
So I tell this to my students, and I'll reiterate this here. Your network are the people you know. Okay, that's your first network, right? You don't know who that person's going to be in 10 to 20 years, right? Your peers as designers, the 12 of you, the 40 of you in the cohort, that is your network. You're all going to be occupying different spaces of design. Maintain those relationships. Maintain that engagement. Take a curiosity in what other designers are doing and do it from a space of genuine love, right? Not to kind of purport to come across as popular, but really ask the questions. How did you get here? How did you do this? I would like to learn. Can we collaborate on a project? Can we collaborate on a product design? Your network is right in front of you on the screen, okay? And then you have mentors like myself. You have the platform that you have where if you have a question and I can help, I'm very quick to share names. There are designers on the continent who love to discuss design, love to put you on to their contexts, because they also wish they had it when they were your age, when they were up and coming designers. So stick together. These are your peers. You are the guys that are going to change the face of design. Okay.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And then this is just more a comment on beige. I think one of the beautiful things about Africa and African design is it is so many things. It's not just bright and colorful. It's not just patterns. Sometimes it's very smooth and clean lines. And very natural colors. And I think that's part of the beauty of what Africa is. It is not just one thing. There's a plurality to what and who we are.
And we honor that.
Thanks.
Yeah, we honor that.
Any other thoughts, comments, or questions? Maybe for some of you also in other disciplines that may, have resonated with you and helped you also on your own journey. So feel free to also let us know your thoughts. Xolile.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hello. So I don't really have a question, but I just want I would like to share how like my business, what I do, and how the process is for me. So I own like a company called Tendalo Trading, which Tendalo is a Swati name. It translates to one with nature. And what we do is we recycle and upcycle old rubber tube from cars, trucks, tractors, and with them we make beautiful, eco-friendly, waterproof, durable, and ethically sourced bags. So the what I've noticed for us and what we do because we are making bags is that our bags are slightly different compared to your leather bag. Simply because the material that we use, which is the rubber tube, it comes already in a shape. It comes round. So what I've encountered like too many times is making a bag and having a client asking for a bespoke bag, and I'd be like, okay, I can try it out for you. I always say that, and they always say, why do you say you will try it out? And I say to them, because not because I am doubting the pattern, but I'm doubting if it's going to like come out because what I've grown to love about using rubber is that it chooses what it wants to become. You would think you can have a certain pattern because that is the bigger tube, but it won't come out and it will come out different. Sometimes it does come out, but it comes out as a total different thing and a beautiful thing that I didn't even think about. We didn't even we were never going to think about such a design, but that journey with it for us it's magical. So we love doing that and we love testing different patterns because are we making one pattern and end up having a different pattern? So that's what it also like taught me submission. You have to submit to the truth because it chooses where what it wants to become. It chooses what life is going to hold outside what it is was created to be, which is a rubber tube.
Nice.
I think we may have lost connectivity with Xolile.
Mm. But I like that, the honoring of materiality. I like that. And maybe I think maybe to Gianni's point, right? Like when you use the original material, right? Like a lot of natural materials are beige. So death to beige, not in the materiality sense, but death to beige in the whitewashing sense. Okay. So I hope that kind of clarifies that ideology for you, Gianni. Honor the materials, and the patterns and the textures that natural materials have. Mud is brown, cow dung is a deep gray, sand is beige or red. So yeah, honoring materials is different to beige washing. Hope that helps everyone as well.
I really love that from my side.
Yeah.
And getting to know and understand who we are, what our
Mm.
world is through design as a lens to navigating identity, our heritage, our history. Really wonderful.
Yeah. I think, Lila, what you said that really resonated with me was the material wants to be what it wants to be, right? We can try and force and manipulate and look at different ways of making. And I mean, there are different ways of making. You can strip things down, you can cut them into bits and pieces to weave them into flat things. And as designers, we need to be open to that. But sometimes we just lean into what the material we're using and the form it wants to become. And I think that's the joy of being a designer. We're open to that experience of exploring more and leaning into what we have.
That is true. That is so true. I love that. I love how you're putting it. And so also like what recently came up in our like conversation, because how I started like the business was I had a stroke 2018. So I had to relearn everything, relearn to use my hands, relearn to walk, to sit without like being tired for some time. And I just came across one rubber tube, picked it up. I do not know why. When I was the first time I went actually out of the house for the first time since I had stroke, I came across a rubber tube from our local mechanic when I was going to the shop. So I just like took that one rubber tube. I think it was because of the shape. It like intrigued me. I took it home, I cut it, and I washed it. It took me time to wash it because it has powder inside. So it took me time to like wash it because I'd get tired from time to time, and I'm just like washing one piece. And when I was done with it, I felt so good. It always felt like I did something for that day. So I just like wake up and go pick like rubber tubes up and come back home, wash them until they piled up. And my mom was like, you have to get rid of these things because they are eating up space and this is dead now. So I was like contemplating if I am going to get rid of those rubber tubes or not. And if I'm not getting rid of them, what am I going to do with them? Where am I going to put them? So when I was thinking about that, where to with these rubber tubes that I've already like washed, which is took me time to really wash them. I was like, whenever I was washing this rubber tube all this time, like I didn't like for those months, I didn't focus on I have stroke, I am useless, I want to exit my body. So whenever I was doing that, I didn't like focus on that. My focus moved, my mindset it just shifted, and I was like, this is so beautiful. How every time I was washing these rubber tubes, I felt like I was cleansing a bigger part of me. And past that, I decided no, let me just create earrings. Let me try smaller bags with them, and I did that. So when I was doing that, I was like, I would say it out loud that I am sewing all the broken pieces in me back to life as I'm sewing the tube by hand. So that is how I found my healing actually. Past like my healing, then I saw the opportunity. So I like it has always been part of me, that personal story and that healing that I received from the tubes has always been part of me. That's why for me it was easy to submit to the tube when it chose to become whatever I'd wanted to become. And when we were talking, so my mom was teasing me a month ago, and she was like, "Oh, it's nice now the bags are in Woolworths, they're selling in Woolworths. But have you ever thought of what happened to the tube when it was living its life as a tube? Like some people were involved in accident. That was why the tube was discarded. Some people lost their lives there. And when you stitch it together, you always speak about healing. You always speak about things held in place. And I was like, I've never thought of it like that. But because of the healing it gave to me, it makes sense why rubber tube is like a beautiful thing. I know I speak like this because I have a story. I have like a personal story with it, but that's what the journey has been for me with tubes and designing. My strongest point is not the designing, and I am I am grateful for that now because I'm using the tube. That the tube it drives me to different designs, so it doesn't have to be a weakness. That is a gifting I receive from it apart from healing.
I love that, and thank you for sharing such a beautiful story. I think it's sometimes we forget that design heals us as designers. Like it's like this weird, you go through life and then you get to this point. Well, for me personally, where I'm kind of conflicted about the next step, and in any inflection point in my life, any kind of crisis moment, design saved me, whether it was talking like this or engaging with people around design or visiting spaces of design, consuming products, right? So thank you for sharing how it healed you, which is brilliant in the making, how the process of making things and engaging our bodies. It kind of grounds us ancestrally. We come from makers and workers and people who toiled the earth and used nature and natural materials to create things. So I can almost see that kind of spiritual journey for you, and beautiful. And I think everyone here can attest to design changing their lives quite positively. Glorina, I see your message as a fellow interior designer. Thank you for sharing that message and for asking that question. So Glorina asked, she mentioned that she uses pattern in her design and fabrication, and asked, are education systems of design incorporating indigeneity into the curriculum? Again, a very slow process, but it's happening. Books are being published by my generation now. A lot of us are switching between practicing design and teaching design because we've noticed the gap, and we are changing curriculum the more we talk, right? So with every new studio brief, with every new rethinking of design history, art history, there's this kind of inception of the architectural and the African context of architectural and interior and language design. A lot of institutions in South Africa that teach visual design, so your graphic and multimedia, they really hone in on the indigenous writing system. So there's a lot of knowledge out there. If you switch from interior design and start looking at graphic and multimedia, the representation of communication design, you'll find a lot of work on indigenous writing systems on the continent. I hope that helps. Cool.
All right. Viveka Risita, I see your hand raised. Please feel free to take the floor.
Hi, one more question. We are based in Cape Town, and we've just noticed at a lot of industry events, we feel like Africans aren't actually being represented. For you, who do you feel are the African pioneers in the creative space who we should be learning from and watching out for, and who represents us?
Who represents Africans in the design space? So I call them like the Simbas of design, and I only know them because I am sitting on the Pan Afrikan Design Institute board, and so I have access to the giants of design on the continent. There's Mugendi Murida. He used to teach at CPUT. He's a Kenyan designer. He used to be the president of the World Design Council. So he's a Kenyan designer. There's Saki Mafundikwa. He's just a multi-generational, multi-hyphenate designer, very, very vocal about African design. He wrote a book called African Alphabets, and that kind of spurred my interest into indigeneity. There are other African designers in the diaspora. There's Sagun. He's based in Canada, and he talks about design as a Nigerian sitting in a Canadian context, but in a Canadian context that honors the indigenous. And so that also spurred his journey in uncovering indigeneity. In South Africa, you have Mpeti, you have Lemon Pebble Architects. Althea is there. You have, let me think. Amira Osman. She was one of my lecturers. I think she's one of the first Africans in South Africa to receive a PhD in design and architecture. She's someone I look up to a lot as a designer. There's Philippa, who's sitting as the head of the Department of Architecture at the University of Cape Town. So there are a few of us isolated on the continent that know of each other, but rarely get invited to the table. So we create our own table. Do you see? Does that make sense? Yeah.
Thank you.
Gianni?
Would you mind telling us more about the Pan Afrikan Design Institute, please?
So the Pan Afrikan Design Institute was started in 2019. A Ghanaian English designer met up with two South African designers at a design conference, and they posed the question that you pose now. Who are the African designers on the continent? What are we doing? Why don't we know of each other? And how do we get together, right? And they started reaching out to the network saying, we want to create this thing. Let's meet in Ghana. Whoever can make it that is a designer, and let's create this forum. And they called it the Pan Afrikan Design Institute to be all-inclusive of all the design disciplines, from the built environment to the 2D space in design. There are currently hundreds of designers on this platform. It's actually a WhatsApp group, and there's a website, and we literally reach out to each other. We share conferences on design, anyone who wants to publish a paper on design, because again, if we don't talk about our work, no one will know our work. And unfortunately, the systems in place are you need to publish in an academic journal. You need to publish a book in order to change curriculum. You know, there's just barriers for entry. And so it's become almost the support group of African designers saying, this is what we're doing in East Africa. This is what we're doing in Egypt. This is what we're doing in Morocco. This is what we're doing in South Africa. This is what we're doing in Guinea-Bissau. Who's interested, join the live stream, join the conversation, listen to what the designers are doing there, observe the youth, right? Any African designer or an African designer from the diaspora can join the Pan Afrikan Design Institute. I think most of you have my contact details through the UVO Africa Accelerate, and I can just pass on the information about joining, but I can also share the website for those who are interested, and just go see the work that has been done up until now, but also just welcome you into the fold. A question was posed to me to find a designer from Côte d'Ivoire, and I literally put it in the WhatsApp. I'm looking for a spatial designer or a design researcher based in Côte d'Ivoire, and I got 4 names. Okay, so it's that kind of network, it's that kind of platform, and I'm using it myself. I'm using it for my mentees. But I think as designers, if we are not part of a collective, we don't know who's doing what. Yeah, how are we gonna thrive? I think also it helps when you travel on the continent, and you like immerse yourself in design spaces. Galleries tend to be where the creatives like to hang out. Who are the artists in the countries that you're visiting? Travel as much as you can, engage as much as you can. Yeah, so that's what PADI does, and that's what they're about. And hopefully I can share the African Design Day details so that you guys can actually listen to who these designers are, get their details and contact them directly. It's a wealth of knowledge on the continent. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Juliet. That's so important indeed to be part of those networks. And I see your comment, Glorina, on the chat. We will ask you, Juliet, if you don't mind, to just give us those references again so that we can share it also to the cohorts via email so that they can easily refer back to all of those great resources that you're being sharing with all of us this morning. And I don't know, Glorina, if you want to also react to the masterclass and share a little bit about your work. Juliet, I don't know if you're familiar with Glorina's work. It's also very strongly rooted in African culture and history. So feel free, Glorina, to take the floor if you wish to share a little bit more about your design journey.
No, definitely. It's a little bit noisy where I am. But
Shame, that's
such a
why I see
pleasure
you.
to yeah, like I feel like today was just a treat because it's not every day that I get to hear from somebody who says the things that I think about, you know. So this was really a treat, and thank you so much for coming to the platform. I feel like as a designer that's still growing in the industry and that is passionate about the continent, yeah, I feel like I should adopt you as a mentor already, looking at the direction that I'm taking. And because you already saw me, I heard you mention some of the tribes from Namibia, and I'm actually currently designing a print for a Namibian.
Wow.
So I was like, oh my gosh, I need to speak to you. So please do share your details. And I'd love to connect with you and become a part of the Pan Afrikan, designers, because I've never even heard of that. So I feel like I'll be finding a home again to connect with like-minded individuals in the design space. So thank you so much for that.
It's an absolute pleasure. We are creating the table, right? Yeah. We are creating the table and the space and agency, right? So congratulations on your work. Namibia is a beautiful country. It's my third home. I know it very well. So yeah, it's an exciting place with a very interesting history. So don't be afraid to ask the hard questions, and yeah, there's a lot of inspiration from that country. One of the most beautiful places I've been. Yeah.
All right. We still have a little bit of time for more engagement questions. So really feel free. I'll give it another couple of minutes for anyone who wants to take the floor, to react, to engage with Juliet, or just share thoughts or key learnings from this session, key takeaways they'll take with them on their journey. But if we don't have any more question, then we can also come to a close. Thank you so much, Juliet Kavishe, for joining us this morning and for leading this great masterclass with us. I think I'm quite confident that all of the artists and entrepreneurs with us this morning have learned a great deal from your story, your experience, your ways of seeing design. So thank you so much for sharing all of that with all of us this morning. We're really, truly grateful that you participated in the Création Africa program. Yes, we thank you on behalf of the Embassy of France, the French Institute of South Africa, and UWU Africa to be part of this process.
No, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for this platform. I think we need more of these. I think I need to start, and maybe I need to make one of these. So we have more incubator and accelerator programs for African designers. So think this is a project I can embark on as well. This has been an honor for me as well, just engaging with young designers. And thank you for supporting the African designers on the continent. I think it's necessary and important. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone. And yeah, if there are any questions that raise afterwards, we'll be trying to share all the references to the various resources that you shared. And if you have any further questions or comments that come up later on, feel free to share it also with me and Rihanna and the team. It will be a pleasure for us to share with Juliet.
Thanks.
Thank
Have
you.
a good day.
Bye.
And
Thanks, Juliet. Thanks, Melanie. Thank you, everyone.
thanks, Rihanna.